This meeting is being recorded.
Good morning, everyone. On behalf of CEGAANA, I welcome you all to today's event, Leadership Lessons with Beatles. This is a conversation, a coffee chat. It's morning in California, but yeah, from wherever you're joining, it's very nice to have you all. I'm very glad to welcome the host of today, Dr. Janaki Akella. She's an accomplished technology leader enabling global high-tech companies, financial healthcare institutions to anticipate, shape, and lead major market transitions and to accelerate growth by aligning corporate strategy. She's a wonderful person having different expertise over years. And among all the accolades, I would say she's also a CEG Distinguished Alumnus. She graduated from CEG and then went on to get her master's and PhD from Carnegie Mellon University. With that short introduction, I'll give the floor to Janaki to take over and introduce our guest speaker.
Absolutely. Thank you, KG. Thank you all joining. Hope you have your cup of coffee, whether it's morning or past dinner, perhaps in India. So Shantha needs no introduction. She's the mentor in the CEG group here, but just by way of a quick roadmap of her accomplishments, currently she serves as the mentor and project guide at Carnegie Mellon's Integrated Innovation Institute. Prior to that, she co-founded Retail Solutions, and prior to that, she was running global product development for an MES system that was acquired by Applied Materials. Her academic accolades include PhD from the Tepper School of Management at Carnegie Mellon, and then what binds us all together, undergraduate from CEG. Welcome, Shantha. What a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you, Janaki. I'm so happy to be here, and I'm so thrilled that CEGAANA made this possible with this webinar. Thank you, KG, for organizing this and guiding us through this. And thank you, Janaki, for taking your time this morning to have this chat. And to all the audience, thank you for coming.
Thank you all. So it's a conversation. Invite participation from the audience as we go through this. I thought we would do it in a few parts. One, a little bit of an overview. Obviously, much has been said about leadership and written, but what makes this book and Shantha's contributions here particularly special is that she talks about how do you become a good leader. You know, leadership is a little bit like we say beauty. You know, you recognize it when you see it, but how do you define it and how do you make it? And she spends quite a bit of time here giving us her own personal experience, the wealth of her personal experience, and tips and actionable items in order to become a leader. So, and then very remarkably linking that to Beatles. So I thought we'd start with a bit of an overview of that. Then I'll deep dive into a couple of topics. She talks about many, many leadership attributes, but I've picked a couple. And then maybe we will end with a little session on how do you balance all of these tensions that leader has to balance. So that's a little bit of the roadmap of what we want to do today. And then we had set apart some time, about 20 minutes or so, towards the end for Q&A, but feel free to add your questions to the chat. I think KG will be gathering them as we go along. And if you feel a question is particularly contextual, absolutely do pipe up and raise your hand and we'll talk about it. Are we good to go with that kind of a roadmap?
Yes, we are.
Awesome. All right, so let me start. So Shantha, you've given a number of Beatles songs, right? You start with Help. Think for yourself, you know, they start from 1965, they go through 67, 69, and all the way through when they went to Hamburg, came back, went to Hamburg as kids, came back to the UK as musicians, and then finally ended up breaking up. In all of this, do you see an evolution of the perspective of the Beatles themselves in terms of how they thought about life and leadership?
Absolutely, Janaki. But before I jump into that, may I read a paragraph or two
Yes,
from my book?
please.
And the reason I say that is it basically sets up the tone for
Please.
my book, essentially how I saw this book being unfolding. And so I'm going to read chapter, first two paragraphs.
Please.
And the chapter is called All You Need Is Love, Heart-Led Leadership. And it starts with a quote from Khalil Gibran. Tenderness and kindness are not signs of weakness and despair, but manifestations of strength and resolution. What do you think of a culture that promotes love and individual creativity? In his book, The Heart of Business Leadership Principles for the Next Era of Capitalism, the former chair and CEO of Best Buy, Hubert Joly, tells the story of Jordan, a 3-year-old boy. His mother brought him to a Best Buy store in Florida with a broken dinosaur toy, a gift from Santa Claus. The two sales associates she spoke to wanted to make the boy feel better. In any retail store, the sales associates would direct the customer to get a replacement. Instead, they enacted a play in which a doctor saves the dinosaur. They went through a mock medical procedure while exchanging the broken toy for a new one. Joly says no operating procedure could have taught the sales associates how to put a smile on a broken kid. A blueprint for making customer happy didn't exist. Best Buy's environment that appreciates an individual's creativity fostered this behavior and encouraged the sales associates to show their love for the customer. Today's leadership. Can you imagine a leader speaking about love and work this way 2 or 3 decades ago? Leadership has undergone a lot of changes since the 1970s. Gone is the autocratic, my way or the highway style of leadership. In its place, we find leaders advocating a more collaborative, participative style of leadership that thrives on emotional intelligence and diversity. Changes in the business environment prompted some of this. 10 years ago, we expected the leaders to know everything and tell the organization what to do and how to do it. We were used to a relatively stable environment. Today, the complexities brought on by technological advances, the global connected workplace, and employees who have grown up with the internet and social media make collective wisdom the key to success. In this environment, leaders succeed by putting people first. They harness the power of their entire organization to bear and make things possible with the emotional intelligence. Today's successful leaders lead not by telling, but by listening and conversing. They lead by inspiring instead of by fear. Since early 2020s, the coronavirus problems have created enormous challenges for the leadership. We witnessed some outstanding leaders emerge during this challenging time, and they lead with their hearts and their minds. With that, I will come back to your question, Janaki. And I think the question was, do you see the evolution of Beatles through their lives? And absolutely. Beatles, when they started out, most of them were teenagers. And they went to Germany, Hamburg, to play in bars and cafes and clubs, sometimes playing 8 hours at a stretch. And they practice their craft over there. When they came back to England, their first concert, I believe, was in 1960, and they were playing in Liverpool, their homeland. And they were advertised as a German band. And when they showed up, the crowd said, what are you talking about? These are Quarrymen, because that was their brand before they went to Germany. And they were kind of, the crowd was a little bit disappointed because they were expecting a German band. And then the Beatles started playing, and it was just magic. The crowd could see how different they were from the time they went to Germany before they, had their experience in Germany. And what they did in Germany was to perfect their craft. They understood their audience. They knew what worked well, what didn't work well. And they basically blossomed into this group that now everybody could appreciate. And then throughout their journey, the Beatles were perfecting themselves, or even experimenting, being innovative. If you think about the kind of music they produced after they had their experience in India, Rishikesh and all that, very different from what they were playing before. And they played with very different instruments, tried different styles of music. And I think what happened towards the end of their life as a band was the fact that they grew up. It's just like all of us who grow up and our interests change, we find new things to do. And from being a group of four guys who made music together, they were becoming very individualistic in their tastes and their aspirations and their interests. And so that led to them associating with different people. And of course, sadly, a lot of that led to them not having fun anymore while creating, and that led to the breakup. So, it's a journey, just like some of the journeys of startups that we see. I liken them to being a startup who grow up and, people change. Yeah.
No, absolutely. I guess one of the thoughts that provokes is that, to become a better leader, then do you need those lived in experiences? Do you need those experiences to shape and learn and refine your perspectives? So would you, if it sounds like you'd agree with that, then how would you advise a youngster who's perhaps a first line manager in terms of their journey?
Yeah. And Janaki, this book was written exactly for those who just are entering a leadership position, from being an individual contributor to a leader managing a team. And my advice to them is really to reflect. So you can go through life, have a lot of different experiences, but never take time to pause and say, what did I learn from this experience, right? Anytime you reflect, whether you read a book and reflect, or you listen to a talk and reflect, or when you see a video and reflect. So the key is not the experience, but the reflection. You really have to say, okay, what did I get from this? And how do I use what I have learned in my life, in how I lead and in how I behave? And so I tell people, you can read a lot of books. Some people will say, oh, I read 100 books this year or whatever. But it doesn't help if you don't pause and say, what did I take away from this book that I can apply? So reflecting is good, and then you have to do it. You have to apply. So nothing beats practicing.
Awesome. So to dive a little bit into the book itself, you start with a set of leadership attributes. You talk about some attributes and link that to songs, right? So getting better, clearly about optimism, within you and without you, about humility, The Long and Winding Road, about tenacity. Get Back, about curiosity. Help, which is about vulnerability, and then thinking for yourself. How did you pick these attributes? What strikes me, and this sort of links back to the passage that you read about how leadership has evolved so much, that perhaps one might have traditionally likened attributes of courage, wisdom, brilliance, strategy, as opposed to humility, tenacity, as some of the pursuits. So how did you pick these attributes?
So when I wanted to write this book about leadership, I really had a technical leader such as myself in mind. When I think about how could I have been a better leader from the get-go, I think about wanting to have read emotional intelligence books. I feel like I was very good at problem solving. We engineers, we are good at problem solving, but you have to take that and then apply to how you lead people. And it's not easy. It's not straightforward. You have to really step back and say, all along, I wanted to be somebody who can solve problems. I'm good at it. But now I have to get it done through others. And not only that, I have to get it done through others, but I have to do it in such a way that I give scope for them to do it themselves. And so when I thought about that, I felt that the aspects of leadership that were missing in my life early on were these humanistic principles, where you really put people first, you do things through people, not by yourself, but rather you appreciate the team that's with you and you empower them and you give them the capabilities, you train them, you coach them. So to me, all of these things meant I have to talk about those aspects as opposed to all the traditional aspects people talk about, right? Courage and wisdom. The thing is, when I talk about all these attributes, these other attributes come into that. So if you talk about tenacity, I would say that you need some of the basic fundamental things that are the pillars of tenacity, like courage, initiative, and all kinds of fundamental things. So for me, I chose to write about the attributes and the skills I chose, and I kind of have always had these Beatles songs stuck in my mind because I have listened to them from when I was 17. And throughout my life, they've been an inspiration for me. I talk about it, like we can work it out, dealing with the conflicts. To me, that song immediately comes to mind. We can work it out, right? So that's kind of the story behind.
Oh, fascinating. And obviously, when you said the songs, then the follow-up question is some popular songs are not there. Yellow Submarine, It's a Hard Day's Night. So just as a, follow-up to that, how did you pick the songs you did from the entire repertoire?
So there are many songs that pretty much everybody knows. And I love those songs. I mean, somebody was asking me, what's your favorite Beatles song? There isn't one because I love them all. And the songs you mentioned, they are very dear to me. However, when I was writing the book, I kind of felt that the 17 titles I chose, meaning the 16 essays plus the conclusion, they kind of resonated with me a lot more than the others. And I also felt, hey, here's a chance to expand the knowledge of people of Beatles songs, even if they have not heard them as much as I am into. And so that's kind of how I chose, just an author's prerogative.
Yeah, totally. It is indeed your prerogative. So wanted to quickly touch on the second section where you talk about leadership skills as being different than attributes. Mm-hmm. And a few things that you talk about in these are things like, the song I Want to Tell You, where you refer to communicating with compassion and gratitude, we can work it out, which is the negotiation.
Mhm.
Anytime at all, that's being generous with your time. I, me, mine, which is very much about delegation, empowerment, and coaching. And the last one, all you need is love, is of course leading with heart. So I thought maybe if you can touch a little bit about how do you differentiate skills from attributes,
Mhm.
that will probably lead us into exploring some of the attributes as the next step.
Sure, sure. Great question, great question. I look at things that a leader needs in two ways. One is that their fundamental behavior needs to be of a certain type so that they can actually use all those attributes in their behavior, whereas the skills tell you how to do it. So for example, things like humility and curiosity, they are very important for you to do anything else at all. For example, humility is great in the sense that it helps you collaborate with people. Nobody wants to collaborate with someone who is arrogant, who has absolutely no respect, who absolutely has no respect for the other's opinions and so on. So humility is very, very important attribute. Similarly, curiosity. Any innovative leader absolutely must have curiosity to know why something is this way and how can I do something differently and so on. Now, if you look at the skills that I talk about, these are things that a leader must have in their toolkit in order to be a good leader. So communication, extremely important. You can be, you can have humility, you can be curious, but if you don't communicate that well, you are nowhere. So I kind of got together a communication framework that allows people to communicate well in one-on-one, in groups, in big audiences. And so similarly, I have this thing about time management, where the leader's time and all of our times, it's really not ours, essentially. It's basically everybody else demanding something from us. And how do you manage your time, which is a skill. And it's a skill, you develop. And so I kind of separated the attributes from the skills.
Super, super. So unless there are any questions, KG, I thought I'll go into the next part of this session, if you will, which is a little bit of a deep dive in exploring a couple of the attributes a little bit more.
Yeah. Is anyone in the audience having any question? Please stop us, otherwise we get going. Okay.
Okay. All right. So wanted to pick on a couple of attributes. The first one I thought was optimism. And you come back to this a couple, 2-3 times in your book. You talk about the leadership attribute as optimism. The song is obviously getting better. And the reason you say optimism is important is because the leaders reap optimism benefits. Mm-hmm. And you talk about a couple of tools. The first one obviously is Seligman's explanatory theory, which in itself is fascinating in that it says that optimism can be learned as opposed to a person being intrinsically optimistic or not.
Yeah.
And then you refer to the ABCD tool, So it would be great, I thought, if maybe we can start with, maybe a personal example, where you can illustrate what is this ABCD tool.
Yeah. So to give you an example, let me go through briefly what this ABCDE method is, and then I will talk about an example. So the 5 elements of the method of ABCDE first identifies what the setback is, or the adverse event. So in all our lives, we come across adverse events. So that's A. And the second is how we feel about the setback, our beliefs. So that's B. And the consequence is how we respond to an event based on our view of that event. That's a C. And then questioning it is the 4th element, is the disputation. It's D. And the last element of the outcome is trying to challenge our beliefs and energizing ourselves to move forward. So this is Martin Seligman's method, which was perfected over the years. And this ABCDE method, I think many of us actually use this without knowing about it. But for those who are pessimistic, knowing about it and deliberately going through it will be very helpful. So to give you an example, early in my career, when I was a software engineer, I had been working for a year or so, and then my manager said, "You're going to go design this whole system by yourself, to do company-wide planning, and you write your algorithms, and let's, do it." So I designed the system, I coded the algorithm, and we deployed it. We actually deployed it only to one company. It's sort of like a beta. And, when the results came back, some of the results were really absurd. One wouldn't expect that kind of a output. So we reviewed the algorithm. We had, others review the algorithm and see what's wrong. And I discovered I had made an error. I was mortified. I said, "My God, what have I done? I was interested with this one thing and I didn't do it well." And that was the adverse event. And my belief was, I am no good at this. I can't do this. I'm not a good, software engineer. And then I sat down with my manager and he said, "Shantha, are you kidding? You've written so many different algorithms before. Let's look at what you're thinking of doing, the consequence of, the quitting. And you have been very good at doing all this, and this time you faltered. And so that's questioning your belief, whether what you thought about that you're no good at this algorithm writing. And then realizing that there was a reason why I had failed and I could rectify it. So that was the last step of energizing. So I think if we are feeling pessimistic about something, it's always good to start thinking about why did it happen, and then go on to rectify it and move on. So never let a setback affect you, but rather question what happened and how can I prevent it from happening, right? So this is the method of moving from being pessimistic to being optimistic. Now, a lot of people will say you're either optimistic or pessimistic. That's not the case. We are all optimistic in many different situations, but in some situations we may be pessimistic. And so how do you, navigate the spectrum of optimism, pessimism, and move towards optimism? That was this ABCDE method. We can't hear you, Janaki.
Sorry about that. So I had a plane flying overhead, so I muted it. Very helpful, because often we read in the literature and comes across a little bit like a cliche that, your mistakes are your learning moments. Mm-hmm. But this tool and how you describe it particularly talks about how to turn that into a learning moment. What do you actually do? Yeah. And the D part of it, with the disputation of your initial belief, is key in that pivot.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Found that very, very interesting. Now, one of the things in that you talk about an example, Andrea, and for her to have, or any example, it's like you need to be self-aware. Seems like self-awareness is a big part of this, and it also is a key in the emotional intelligence sort of rubric that underlies your book, if you will. What are some markers? How does one go about thinking and becoming self-aware?
Yeah. So you bring up this excellent point about emotional intelligence and self-awareness. Without self-awareness, you can't do anything about improving yourself. You can't become a better version of yourself. So what do you do about self-awareness? It's about kind of taking a step back and looking at yourself, and saying, what am I good at? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What do I believe in? What has brought me to this point in my life? What were my actions that made it possible? Where did I succeed? Where did I fail? And what are my limits? What am I willing to do and what am I not willing to do? So all these questions about yourself is about self-awareness. And you can develop self-awareness by looking at yourself like this periodically and then trying to see where do you want to make a change and go for it. Now, self-awareness has two parts to it. One is what you are knowing about yourself, but the other is how does the world see you? So that's the external self-awareness, for which the way you would go about getting that is at the workplace, you can get a 360-degree review in which your supervisor, your colleagues, your peers, and your reports, they all provide feedback on you. And you can learn from that in terms of what does the world see you as, and then try and modify yourself. Now, for a new manager, I think you wanted some simple markers, right? Now, those simple markers are really about asking yourself, how do you behave with your team? Do you thank them for your contributions? Do you let them do their job without interfering too much, the micromanaging? Do you give them praise when they deserve it? Do you, are you transparent? Are you open with them about how you are thinking about what went on in maybe a project or something? And you're also looking at their aspirations, not just the aspirations of the team as such at that moment, but you are looking at every individual in your team as a unique person and what do they want in their lives? And are you friendly and care about what happens to them? So these are all very simple things. You can ask yourself these questions, and get your idea as to how I'm doing. But you can also do something very straightforward. You have one-on-ones with your team members. Ask them, how am I doing? What can I do better? What would make your work more meaningful and give you growth? Tell me. And usually people are very willing to talk to you if they see you are genuinely interested and you listen.
Totally.
Yeah.
I should have maybe started with this. Cannot have a conversation around optimism without thinking about Here Comes the Sun from Beatles.
Yeah.
So how did you not pick that song?
Yeah. To me, Here Comes the Sun is, how do I say this? It's something very spiritual. Here Comes the Sun is about hope. And hope is something that you have to have for you to be optimistic. You can't be optimistic and go do things if you don't have hope. However, what I was talking about was more about a leader doing things, accomplishing things. And so for me, it made sense to use a different song, not this overarching spiritualistic, Here Comes the Sun, but rather getting better. And keeping the mind on, it's always going to be better tomorrow, kind of a,
Absolutely. I just had to ask it. I'm sure there are many Beatles fans.
Oh, yeah. Here comes, yeah. See, the other thing is I already had 4 songs that were, George Harrison's.
Yes.
And so I didn't want to add one more. Then the whole thing would become George Harrison's versus the Beatles.
Indeed. One of the things, as a sort of the thought is, and this is maybe more reflective of the very polarized situation in US, at least with respect to leaders and their perspectives. And you talk about, an exemplary leader as being one who supports the needs of their followers, right, of their supporters.
Yeah.
And when you talk about, these conversations in the one-on-one, ask them, how can I do better? Am I supportive? How can I support? It struck me a little bit that yes, but how about having a legitimate cause or a soul or a bit of a North Star? Otherwise, you could probably have a leader, and maybe I should refer to somebody in the history, not in the more recent past. Maybe Hitler was an amazing leader, but probably didn't have a soul.
Yeah, very, very, very good question, and a very tough one. It comes down to each of us. What do we believe in, right? So a leader who is just, coming into something and saying, oh, I'm going to make all my supporters happy, it doesn't work. Because one of the things of being a leader is that you are wanting to do something. You are wanting to effect a change. You are wanting to innovate. You want to do whatever it may be. And if your heart is not in that, you're not going to be able to energize. You're not going to be able to be a visionary, which is something I talk about, in terms of the situational leadership, right? So at times you have to be a visionary, at times you have to be a coach, at times you have to be an affiliative leader. And if you don't have it in you to believe in something and to put all your efforts behind it, you won't have followers. You're not going to, energize and lead anybody. So to me, that is fundamental in terms of wanting to be a leader, is that do you believe in something so that you actually say, hey, I believe in this and I'm going to make it happen and I'm going to need your help. And that's kind of where I would say it comes.
Totally.
Yeah.
And that one, just the last one, when you're all in it, trying to make it happen, is there such a thing as recognizing this is the end of the road and quitting, or no?
Absolutely, absolutely. In everything, everything you do, you want to be persistent, but you don't want to be stubborn. And I talk about this in this chapter, tenacity, right? Where you have to be flexible and you have to know when something is not working. And at that point in time, when you believe something is not going to work, you have to ask yourself, why is this not working? And be willing to analyze it and understand why something is not working and why you may not be able to achieve it. Now, when you do that without putting the blame on yourself or others, but just looking at the situation objectively, you may come up with the things where you are finding that it may be entirely due to a different reason that it's not succeeding. And then you may be able to go and fix and move on. But you may also find, you could do all kinds of things, but it's just not in your control, because there are a lot of things that are not in your control. And at that point, you should have the courage to pivot. Mm-hmm. So that pivoting is the point where you are saying, I'm going to quit what I'm doing there, but I'm going to do something else. Yeah. So people who are great leaders, they don't quit, they pivot. That's, how I look at it.
No, totally. And so relevant in Silicon Valley, where we fail fast and pivot. Yeah. If I can tie this to another chapter further down in the book where you talk about negotiation, mm-hmm. and you talk about optimism as one of the underlying pillars. You got to be optimistic about the outcome, optimistic that the other person is in there for a genuine, legitimate reason.
Yeah.
Wondered if you could talk a little bit about the role optimism plays in that, mm-hmm. and also the tool. You referred to a tool there, which we can best alternative tool to negotiated agreement, and maybe touch on an example.
So when you encounter conflicts, the best way to deal with a conflict is to have a negotiation, right? And when you are starting a negotiation, you have to have that optimism that it's going to work out. We can work it out. That's optimistic. And if you don't have that, you might as well not go into a negotiation and say, hey, not going to do this.
Not gonna work.
Yeah, and that optimism needs to be accompanied by the trust in the other person, meaning the other party also wants to resolve the situation. Now, you could go into a negotiation full of optimism and full of trust, but you should have done your homework. You should have looked at what is the other party coming in with, and be very realistic about it too, and have this respect for this other party. Why are they doing what they are doing? And then you can work through this conflict. Now I talk about this BATNA, and it's a negotiation strategy which says you can go into a negotiation, but always have something in your hand which says if you don't like what you're hearing, you can go back to that. So an example I give in the book is about me negotiating with a software vendor. In fact, I had two vendors with who were proposing a tool, development tool, and I knew what my budget was, and I had one proposing a tool that was a little bit higher, and then I had this other vendor proposing something that was not as high as the first one. And in my negotiations, I had in my back pocket this fallback position of this other vendor if the negotiation with the first one didn't go through. And in talking to that first vendor, I realized that they were also very good in terms of their customer service. And, they were, the kind of vendor that you would like to have. So while I'm negotiating all this, I have the facts. And so in the worst case, if the price didn't come down to fit my budget, or, maybe slightly above, I could always go back to the second vendor. But I knew that I had this other thing in my pocket. So while I'm negotiating with the first vendor, I'm talking about, why don't you bring your price down? I can be your reference. So you have some of these things that you can apply in order to get the negotiation to go your way. And in that kind of negotiation, the first vendor agreed because they wanted the business and they liked the prestige of being able to say, Shantha is my customer, right? So it all comes down to what are you willing to settle for in the negotiation, and have something in your pocket which says, if I cannot settle for what it is, I can use something different. So
thank you, super helpful. No, yeah. I mean, nothing brings it to life as a real example. Thank you for that. You come back to optimism again later on in the book when you talk about, what are the key pillars that a business leader has for stress reduction, stress management, and the well-being being key to the success of the business leader. So here again, you talk about various strategies that one can have, and I'm curious a little bit. You pick a song which actually was perhaps the precursor before Beatles decided to go their own ways.
Right.
So talk a little bit about the song and perhaps a personal example where optimism helps you get through stress.
Sure. So I chose the song Let It Be for stress management, because to me, you can let stress overtake you, or you can deal with it. So I was just reading something the other day. I mean, how you react to stress is under your control. Stress is there for us, all of us. We all have different stress every day. But how we react to it is completely in our control. And you can use different techniques, coping mechanisms. For me, it's listening to music. I am always listening to music, makes me feel better right away. I like puttering around the house, doing chores. All those really, really help. When you come across stress, which is something that is totally out of your control, you have to kind of hold on to a belief. I'm not a religious person. But I do believe in Ganesha. Don't ask me why. From the very young age, I've always prayed to Ganesha, take away the obstacles, give me A's in my exams, right? So recently, my daughter was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. She has 3 young children, and this is something that weighs on me every day. And it is stressful because I think, oh, what would happen, if she were to be affected and not be able to care for her kids. Then I tell myself, I'm here. Lucky for me, I'm very close to her. I can help her anytime that she needs help. And, she is so good about learning about this, working with her doctor and so on. I don't worry about that aspect of it because I know she's going to take care of it. And so it's one of saying, okay, this happened. I have to live with it. And what is the best way I can help that family deal with it? And so it's something that you can do things for you to reduce the stress. And one of the other things that I had to worry about was that when I was having to lay off my team members after we were acquired by Applied Materials, we went through a downturn in the semiconductor industry. And that was extremely stressful because I don't believe in laying off people. And so I said, okay, wait a second, I can, take control of this. So I said, put me on the list for the people to be laid off. And by making myself as one of those, I could save several engineers. And I said, with that team can still go on and be viable and be able to support all the customers we had. And so you can do some actions. Don't become paralyzed is what I'm trying to say when you are stressed. Do all the things that are the coping mechanism. Some people, for them, meditation helps a lot. And do those things to manage your stress and try to get out of that stress situation as best as you can.
Oh my gosh, Shantha, you've just showed us, exemplified how you're a leader, great leader, by being so vulnerable and sharing something so close. And so thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for that. I see KG has popped on. How are we doing for time? I know we wanted to chat through a bit more.
Yeah.
How are we doing?
I have a direct question to me. I'll ask, and then we can also open up directly if we're towards the close. Otherwise, we can take more, we can continue the discussion. So the question I have is from Sangeeta. It is, how do you balance between being a results-oriented and being a people-first manager? Some folks seem to believe that putting people first means you're not result-oriented.
Exactly. Yeah. A fantastic question. Fantastic question. So the key is to have those results be important, but at the same time, look at the people side by side. It's not one or the other. They both need to be looked at. And you have to use your situational leadership style to then manage all these tensions. So this is a tension in any leader's life, is that, do I do this versus that? How do I behave? And you can say, I need results. That's perfectly fine. But how to get those results will have to be putting your trust in your team and training them, empowering them, giving the tools to do what they need to do, removing the roadblocks. That, combined then gives you the ability to get results, at the same time pay attention to your people. So for example, you are in the middle of delivering some important release. And let's say one of the developers has a crisis in her family. You don't say, I don't worry about that. I need results. No, that's not it. You have to stop and say, okay, this person needs some care at this time. And so you talk to them in an affiliative manner. You find out what's wrong. You give them the support. And then you enlist the whole team to say, who can take up this person's responsibility now, because she's behind and she's not going to be able to contribute more. And even after doing that, you may find that you had promised a release by July 18th, and now you're going to be behind by a couple of days. So go talk to whoever you have promised the date to and say, this is the situation and this is how I'm dealing with it. And I'm trying to deliver it as close to the original date as possible, but I may slip by a day. People don't die by a day, okay? So it's all about combining all these skills to say, I'm going to take care of people who need my support at this time. I'm going to keep my eyes on the results, and I'm going to manage expectations. So it is a juggling act, but you can do it.
Excellent.
Nicely put. Thank you. I'm inviting everyone to participate in the Q&A. Please raise your hand if, or you can also go first. First person is always free here, so not yet. So who is the bravest? If not, I'll put myself as the bravest. I think you slightly touched upon it, but I was thinking about this current situation, economic downturn, right? It feels like first thing get hit is like people getting laid off. Mm-hmm. And how does sort of a way people organizations should change to have more resilience, and this should be the last resort, or is it already we are at the last resort, or sort of?
So a good organization will use layoffs as the last resort. And I say this because there are other things that can be looked at, right? Obviously, you've seen the Google, freezing headcount and, restructuring and all that. And leaders can always ask the team, we are struggling, and here's the situation, and have people's opinion about what can be done. In my company, my first company, which was tied to the semiconductor cyclic nature of working, it boom and bust. Okay, so we needed to do things, so a lot of hiring happens, and then it's in a downturn and you don't have any revenue. I think the leaders have it in themselves to manage how they hire. They can always look at it and say, we know the nature of this industry and we know this is going to happen, and somewhat smooth out their hiring instead of going all gung-ho about hiring and then laying off people when they when the bust hits. That's one thing. But the other thing is they could always request the teams to say, would you be willing to take some pay cut? This would save laying off people. So there are so many strategies, and having a reduced number of hours people work, giving people time off, mandatory time off. All these strategies should be looked at before you come to layoffs, because layoffs happen because the leaders didn't manage the company well. It's upon them. So in my company, at one time, all the C-level staff took a big pay cut in order to support the rest. Another time, it was more widespread, it was the entire team. So all these things can be done. And I believe in many companies where with enlightened leaders, they do this. However, what the media sees is the layoff, and they will say, oh, this company is laying off.
I had some personal friend affected, and that's when I started realizing how in a one day of time things can change. So something that bothered me. I have some other chats coming in, inspirational and inspiring, Shantha.
Thank you.
If there's no question, I'll let continue. Any closing?
Yes. I wanted to ask, Shantha, you said you could not pick a favorite Beatle song, but perhaps we could end this by, who's your favorite leader or leaders?
There are a number of them, but the most in the most recent pandemic situation, I have seen Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, to be one of those leaders who I can really admire. If you look at how she dealt with pandemic in New Zealand, that is a lesson for a leadership book. And the way she put herself in front of people, communicated with them as one of them, and at the same time being very firm in laying out a program of preventing more infections. They had this four level notification, if you will, and and she first said everybody is at we are at level 2, but then when information came in, she immediately changed it to level 4. Just shows that leaders have to be willing to put themselves out there as straw man, but when information comes in, they should be willing to change their mind and be also open to people. We are all in this together. We don't know what's going on, but we will do this together. Give them that, pep talk, if you will, of making sure that everybody is optimistic about overcoming. So she's one that comes to mind right away, but I have many others too.
Sure. Thank you. How are we doing on the questions, KG?
I have one raised hand. Sita, could you just ask a question? I'm sorry, I saw a raised hand and.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I did raise my hand and then I thought I would type my question. I'm curious, Shantha, especially since you took Jacinda's example, is it easier for women leaders to exemplify or adopt these attributes and practices that you have observed?
So your question, Sita, is whether women leaders exemplify some of these leadership principles. Is that?
Yes. Is it easier for them? Is it easier for them to do this than for some of the alpha males?
Well, I don't want to say that it's easier for them. I think that if you look at business, for example, people praise Satya a lot for being the kind of leader that, actually empowers their organizations and so on. I think there is something about the nurturing aspect of women, which comes from having taken care of their families for the longest time, that seems to kind of, play into this very smoothly. And I think there are many males too who are very nurturing and are great coaches. For example, I talk about Bill Campbell in the book, who was a coach for many of these big companies like Apple and Google and so on. And I think it's something that one has to consciously apply to everything they do. And when they do, it becomes, second nature to them. So I'm sure I didn't answer the question. I'm trying to be, how do I say, diplomatic here.
No, yeah, certainly. I didn't mean to put you on a spot. It just occurred to me. I mean, considering what's going on in the world, I always think, if we had women leading various nations, we wouldn't be having all these conflicts that's happening all the time, So,
Yeah.
so certainly, no, I didn't mean to. Your answer was right on, spot on. But it was just more a reflection on my part than.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it comes very naturally to some of us. Early in my career, I was not the kind of leader that I would have liked early in my career. I was very stern and, I was very defensive if people criticized me, but I learned. And, for some, actually, that comes very naturally, even if they are first level manager.
Yeah. Agree.
Madhavan has a question.
Good morning, Dr. Shantha and Dr. Janaki. Very interesting session. I happen to be a very senior alumni of CEG.
Oh, thank you.
I'm not too sure which batch you belong to, Dr. Shantha. I'm a visiting alumni, if I may call myself. I'm in the US for a while, and I transit. Anyway, the point is, I like that concept of people first. I recall with great interest a book Mr. Vineet Nair of HCL Technologies had written a few years back with that title, which had created a big ripple. I mean, I think when it came on, people, particularly in the IT industry, saying, what is he talking about? We always said customer is first. And here was one propagating the theory, not necessarily so. Keep people at the first instance and they will take care of the customers.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I really liked it. But then the thought that comes to my mind is, as an individual leader, you may have some strong beliefs like people first. However, unless the organization at the very top is willing to go along and support you in, what shall I say, in implementing some of these activities, you may have a tough time. So would you not think that the organization at the topmost level need also to subscribe to some of your value systems, also your philosophies, understand that it is best in the larger interest of the organization that we follow some of these principles? So have you had any challenge in, of that nature, that you had a set of ideas or thoughts, but not necessarily so willingly supported by the people at your top?
Yeah, so this is where you have to think about it as, let's say you are a first level manager. And as long as you are producing results, people are not going to question you on how you do your job.
Right.
Okay, nobody is going to come and say, don't empower your people. Nobody is going to say, don't do this. For everything that you do, you can have a justification. For example, you want your team to go and have a training, for example, and it costs XYZ dollars.
Right.
You can, as a manager, as a leader, first level leader, justify that by saying, if you do this, this is what you will expect. Right. And so, as I was saying before, you have to manage the expectations up, your team, your peers, and you can do it, and your scope is limited, right? It's always easier when it comes all the way up from the top, and that is the
Right.
company culture. So
Right.
for example, having a fearless organization, having psychological safety, all that, if it comes from the top, great. Your job as a leader at the first level is much, much easier.
Right.
But guess what? You have to be a leader and grow, which means sometimes you have to take risks and say, this is how I am managing my team, but I'm not giving up the results, which is what maybe the higher ups are expecting of me. It's a little harder, yes, but then what are we without challenges?
Just a supplementary question. Would you have some feel as to how organizations in the US, for example, react to certain beliefs and support you as a first level or second level manager, as compared to what an experience could be in the Indian context for some of the managers, for our own alumni, for example? Would you have any idea? Or would you have any thoughts?
Unfortunately, when I worked in India, I did work in India for, I think, 3-4 years. It's long time ago. And
Right.
I don't even have a recollection of exactly how things worked there. So I'm not at all qualified to answer that one. All my work experience has been here, but maybe somebody else who has done it.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Maybe I think you might have heard from friends who are still here in India working, and you might have shared some experiences,
yeah.
or you might have discussed things as to why we.
No, I read about people like Tata,
Right.
and I actually mentioned that in saying, how do you care about your people? J.R.D. Tata, I mean, he used to tell people, send me your issues.
Right.
And let me hear about that, straight from your mouth. So there are, examples like that, but I don't have any first-hand knowledge. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
So I have to jump in on a time check. I know our host has a stop, and I also want to have a formal stop here so that we have good recordings. Then we're going to keep the floor open. Dr. Shantha is going to be available for answering all your questions. I have a couple of questions and raised hands, so please stick around. After the finish, you can still have the conversation going.
Yeah.
With
Janaki, thank you so much.
Not at all. Thank you.
Your questions were just outstanding. Let me tell you, it really brought out a lot of things that, thank you so much.
Well, thank you. It was a delightful Saturday morning. I unfortunately have to catch a flight.
Yeah.
Thank you all. Thank you, KG. Look forward to catching up soon.
I'm going to invite you back soon. That's what I have to tell you. So thank you so much. Yes. So I don't know, I thought to complete with the recording, or you can go with and
we can keep going. I know Indu has her hands raised.
Yeah. And I have one more question on chat. So I'll let Indu ask next, and then we can go to the question on chat.
Sure.
Hi, Dr. Shantha.
Hi, Indu. How are you?
I'm fine. Sorry, I missed most of your talk. There was another ongoing thing here, but I'm going to watch the recording. Please do share. I hope you'll be sharing in the CEGAANA Betterment group. Yeah, Betterment group also. Okay, my question is, Shantha, I agree with you totally about leaders being caring and looking at the personal side of things and all that. But sometimes, personally, I find that I'm on the other end of the spectrum. I find it difficult to go tough when things are not going well. No, I'm good on the caring and being concerned and all that. So as a leader, I think this is also very important, right? How to talk tough and when situation warrants that. It's a personality thing, I think, and it doesn't help. What are your inputs on or some tips on how to go tough when people don't perform and it's affecting the project?
Yeah, yeah. And it's a very common one, right? I mean, we have a team, some do very well, some don't do well. And you do have to look at each one of them and say, how is this person doing? And to me, doesn't happen once or twice a year. It happens. The feedback is so important. You have to be giving that feedback all the way through every chance you get. And you can't wait for a time to give feedback in 6-month review or 12-month review, whatever that may be. When you are doing something, you have delegated a task, or you have asked a team member to perform something and they don't do it well, you need to immediately sit down and say, look, this was my expectation and it didn't happen, and I want to understand why it didn't happen. So not to say, hey, you didn't do your job well, you're gone, or you're not going to be promoted, whatever. That is not good. What is right is to sit down when something is not going well at the time that it's happening and talk about it, and not blame, but rather try to understand why it didn't go well. So it's all about having this difficult conversation, but doing it in a way that makes the other person understand that what you are interested in is to understand why it didn't go well. It could be that they don't have the training, or they didn't understand the instructions well, any number of things. But you can try to see what is not going well and try to rectify it. Now, if this happens multiple times, even after you have done all you can, then you need the come to Jesus meeting, which is sit down and say, hey, it's not working. Perhaps you are not interested in this particular task. Why don't you look at doing other things? So be very open about it. But you don't do that without having given this person a chance to do better. I always come from the percept that everybody wants to do a good job. If you come at it from that angle, then you can help them to do better. You can try and change things, some of which may be under your control, some of which may not be, but you give all that a try before saying, hey, this is not working.
Okay. Thank you. I think that's an important task. I mean, it's important to evaluate all along. I agree with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So I have a question from chat. It's from Prabhakaran. When we plan for the growth of individual contributors, we give them new responsibilities to take on. For example, leading a meeting with a group. How can we motivate them to break the barrier and be successful?
So is the issue that you're trying to do to delegate some of your duties to the team members, and how do you impress upon them to take it up? Is that what the question is?
That's correct. That's correct, Shantha. Hi, Shantha. How are you doing?
Good, good.
Sorry, I'm just recovering from COVID, so just didn't want to talk, but yeah, the question is basically we are trying to kind of bring some of these individual contributors, Shantha, to the next level, right? So we are kind of putting them on new responsibilities. Hey, lead this meeting, which I have been doing actually, right?
Yeah.
I know, as you very rightly said, everybody wants to do a good job, right? I also have that very same concept, but then these people want to kind of come in and then they have been in their shell actually, right? And then I am trying to bring them, and nobody believes in them, right? I'm saying, hey, I'm going to break that barrier, right? I'm going to bring this guy on board, put him there, and let us see, and maybe the first time he fails, the second time he's catching up. So I'm trying to see if there are any kind of a tools or things for to give it to them to kind of hold on to it as they kind of cross this barrier, actually, right? And believe me, they are very, very willing to do this, actually, right? But how can they kind of break this barrier? Can they kind of hold on to something when they run this meeting, or do some homework when they kind of go to this meeting before this meeting, and feel confident that they can ace this through, right? So, and these are individual contributors, and we are kind of bringing them outside their kind of comfort zone, actually.
So there is a difference between doing things outside your comfort zone and things that you don't care to do, because you may look at it as bringing them outside their comfort zone. They may look at it as, I really don't want to do this. I never want to be a manager or manage meetings. Tell me, I'm coming to the meeting, I'm going to give you my input on how things need to happen. And don't ask me to spend the time managing meetings or whatever. So you have to understand each person in your team and their motivation for being there. Some may want to, grow and become managers and whatnot. Others may say, I just don't care. This is what I want to do. And then that conversation of finding out what each person wants, you need to have that constantly, because things do change. And it's you as a leader who needs to say, if you do this, this, and this, what is the growth? If you don't do this, what is the growth? Because I don't know about your company, Kripa, but I think many organizations have tracks for individual contributors, tracks for managers, and people can choose. I don't know how it is in your place, but if people want to be individual contributors, they need to be excellent in something that they do. When I talk about individual contributors, my mind goes to this database guru we had in my first company. The kind of respect and reverence that he had, nobody else had, not even the CEO. And he achieved that because he was excellent in what he did. So you have to paint a picture of, if you want to be this could be a path for you. And if you want to be a manager, you should be willing to do all these other things, which really, are going to expand your skills in terms of time management, people management, task management. So you have to kind of find out if people are willing to do one or the other.
Got it.
And say that's how they are going to be evaluated and how
they
perform.
Yeah.
So you have to really know whether they want to do something. If they don't want to do it, no amount of explaining, do this
will work.
and come out of your comfort zone won't work.
Yeah. Thank you, Shantha. Thank you.
Thank you for that question.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I have two people in line. I have one chat request from Aruna. She's going to ask the question herself directly.
Yeah.
And then we will go to Avinash.
Okay.
So Shantha, I don't know if it's kind of a moral dilemma kind of a question, in the sense that in some layoffs, or even when we had to let go of people, like fire them, it was easier to do that when either if we are part of it, or perhaps we are giving them enough time to go find some other opportunity, right? So that you know that their life is not disrupted.
Yeah.
But going back to your other earlier point, where if the company does not believe that, and as a manager, are there any things that you can do to make it easier while not revealing that they will be laid off? Or how do we ensure that their life will be fine without having to reveal it to them? It's a
so this is where the transparency comes in, right?
Yeah.
We have to believe the people who are in your team are all adults. They can read the writing on the wall. Okay, so this is where transparency comes in. You know, what are the challenges in front of the company? If you know it, you should be able to talk about it and say, these are the challenges we are facing, not to raise alarm, but rather say, this is where we are. And if the team believes that it's okay, we can overcome the challenges, they trust the leaders, you know, they know it, they will stay on. But those who feel even a little, the slightest, you know, concern about their jobs may want to go find another job. But you can't say that there is a layoff coming. That is just not done, right?
Yes,
yes. But being transparent about the situation, the challenges that the company is facing, that's how companies should operate. It should be that every employee knows what's going on in the company. It's not something only a select few people know.
Yeah, I think oftentimes I've tried to ensure, like, even when I'm like letting people go, this is a way I faced it in a different company, so that's why I was curious always how to handle it. But when you're letting a person go, I usually end up having a conversation with them and having them go search for a job so that it's easier, right? But I was not sure how to handle it at the past company, so that's why. Thank you. That's a very good idea. I didn't handle it that way, but yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Avinash, do you want to go next, please?
Sure. Yeah. Hi, Dr. Shantha. Thanks so much for your time and your perspective. So question from me is, especially in the current climate and current environment where, you know, people are working remote, teams are distributed. It's not as easy to have, you know, quick sort of a human touch conversation, which is there in the office when pre-COVID times. So how do we, you know, as somebody who's, you know, fairly early in their career, you know, when compared to some of the folks here, how do we kind of build cultural leadership? Or if I want to build like a team remotely in this current environment, what can we do? What are your inputs that maybe I could take?
Excellent question, Avinash. I think this is probably in the minds of everybody in terms of how do we make remote teams function as if, you know, they are close to each other. You know, in the case of being physically in one location, there is a thing called management by walking around. That is something that leaders who are very much in tune with what's going on in the company do. I mean, they don't sit in their offices, but they come out, they walk around, talk to people, you know, early morning coffee, you know, near the coffee machine or near the water cooler. That kind of informal communication oftentimes is something that people appreciate, especially if you listen to people and take their input and actually do something about it. And I always claim that you can do a very similar thing with remote teams using some of the tools that we have. For example, most companies I know use Slack, right? And people who are growing up in these times, they are more used to instant messaging. And if you want to establish some relationship with anybody in your company or grow something, use the power of instant messaging. So if you see somebody who is online logged in, just ping them and say, hey, how are you doing? And, you know, start a conversation. If they are busy, you know, they actually should have set their status to saying busy or whatever. But if they are online, you know, the perfect opportunity to have a conversation and develop that. And you have to do more communication than when you are in person, because obviously you don't have all those opportunities. But it can be done if you consciously over communicate and build relationships. So you can always ask people to, hey, I would like to have a chat. Come on, Google or whatever, when it's convenient for both of you. So those are some of the things you can do even when you are remote.
Sure. Okay.
Shantha, if I can add a comment.
Yeah.
So in my team, one of the things we did, we used WebEx Teams instead of Slack with the same concept. We created a sort of miscellaneous kind of chat for the team. That is so that the work talk and the fun talk doesn't get mixed in. And when you have only a work channel, then people are hesitant to post about, hey, I just, went whitewater rafting this weekend and here are a couple of pictures, the types of things you would do in the hallway.
Yeah.
So that has helped, get people to get a little bit more connected and feel as though they're there. They're not there, everybody is remote, but that has helped. And it has helped not annoy people who are distracted by those. PTO come back and trying to catch up. They're not, having to deal with all of that. So that has turned out to be a good tool for us.
Oh yeah, excellent point, Sangeeta.
We do two things actually. We do have the same Slack channel concept, like a coffee time channel. We call it as a coffee time. And everybody can post their wedding or whatever pictures. The other thing we also do is once a month, we have a meeting set up only to ask questions or talk about each other.
Yeah.
Because most of the meetings are work oriented. So we do once a month, and that really helps because then we're not discussing about anything around the product or status or anything, but more about the personal thing. And that helps a lot as well.
Oh yeah. Excellent points. Yeah, I think that today everybody is trying to find ways to keep connected, even though you cannot see each other in person, and it can be done. I believe that obviously face-to-face is always best, but in the absence of that, I think technology can help quite a bit.
Yeah, we are almost exceeded the time, and it was really nice to have a lot of participation towards the end. I think they warmed up a lot. So I don't know if there is anyone waiting to ask questions. Otherwise, we can wind up.
So KG, the ability to post chat to everybody seems to have been lost. I don't know if it was intentional, or is it just me I'm having trouble?
No. I mean,
I'm just wondering if others were trying to post anything and not able to do so. I can only do DM to you or to Shantha.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, it makes sense because most of them have been DMing me. I don't know why. Okay. Yeah, sorry. Okay, I'll find out what happened.
It could be a setting in our account, perhaps.
It wasn't like that for most of the call.
Correct.
Yeah.
Oh,
Initially,
okay, I changed the setting now. Sorry about that. I mean, I don't know how that was set. I found where it is.
So Khalil, you had something you wanted to say?
Oh, no, I just wanted to thank you and Janaki for the time you have taken to do all this. But obviously, every question, every chapter requires, follow-up questions. It's so much deeper that we can go. I'll need to stay awake overnight if we need to exhaust that. So can we make this a monthly get together? Once a month, we talk about these kind of things. I mean, this is something which popped up on the top of my head, but something we can think about.
Sure, we can definitely think about it. Yeah.
Maybe just the topic of leadership. Maybe once a month conversation.
No, we don't want to throw all the burden on Shantha. It's just that we can have different people and then we can have the discussions.
If I may speak on that, I think I've been looking into something after like some interest. Even if we can have committed 15 to 20 people on a very regular basis, we can do something for sure.
Yeah,
I'm willing to organize and volunteer for that.
Awesome, KG.
And thanks for reinforcing that idea.
Yeah. By the way, when someone, I don't remember who, was asking about developing and grooming, your team members to take on additional responsibilities.
Yeah.
Shantha may have forgotten, KG might have forgotten, but I remember this in the Ask a CEGian facilitators meeting. Initially, Shantha was leading our meetings, which we do monthly. At some point, she asked for somebody to take over. And, KG volunteered, but with reputation. And at that time, she did exactly what she said today. And look at KG today. The baby is all grown up. By the way, he's a 2014 graduate.
Thanks. I was actually preparing a last plugin saying that I had the pleasure of working with Shantha for like almost 2 years now. And I've like sort of like gone through different phases of development myself and still like continue learning. So there are like wonderful people in CEGAANA, and we want people to join and support in all our activities. Please do reach out and join CEGAANA. That was the plugin I planned for. You brought it earlier. Yeah, thank you so much for the kind words, actually. Yeah.
And thank you everybody for attending this session. It made my day. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks much, KG, for
Take care. Have a
organizing,
nice
and
weekend.
thank you, of course, to Shantha.
Yeah, thank you, KG. Couldn't have done this without you.
And of course, a big thanks to Janaki for helping moderate this.
Of course, and thank you to you, Sangeeta, for promoting this in multiple places too. Yeah.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yep. Please
Bye,
show
folks.
up in all our events and keep supporting us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.